And we've got some breaking news. The July jobs report was released just moments ago, and it shows that the United States added 73,000 jobs last month. That is less than the 100,000 that economists had expected. The unemployment rate saw a slight increase to 4.2%. The report also revealed job totals for June and May were revised much lower, down a combined 258,000 from the previous announced levels. That's significant. Joining us now, NBC News senior business analyst and host of the 11th Hour, our friend Stephanie Ruhle. Steph, seems like a pretty bad news report. Outside of healthcare and a couple other sectors, job market actually shrinking, and certainly this didn't meet expectations.
Absolutely not. Healthcare and service jobs. That's where we actually saw hiring. And where didn't we? Manufacturing. So that's what I really want to focus on, because there's been all this talk that, look, the president made these tariff announcements a few months ago and the economy still held. Well, what the economy has done is braced itself, like waiting for tariffs to hit, which, as you know, is going to happen now. And this idea that we're going to bring back these manufacturing jobs, they're not happening. So the interesting thing is, OK, well, if the jobs picture is worsening, are we potentially going to get a rate cut, right? Could that be back on the table in September? Well, maybe if you look at the jobs picture. But the thing is, Jonathan, the main reason why we haven't and might not get that rate cut is because of these tariffs and all of the uncertainty and problems it's causing, not just for countries and economies around the world, but what the tariffs are doing is hurting the U.S. economy, U.S. companies, and eventually the U.S. consumer. And if we're looking at the jobs picture as bad as it is, and now the U.S. consumer is bracing itself for higher prices, that's not a good picture.
Yeah, and on tariffs, the president announced a sweeping new set of them that will take effect next Thursday after several countries failed to strike a deal. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake has more.
President Trump making good on his threat to impose what he's called reciprocal tariffs on nearly every nation, with the White House announcing sweeping import tax rates ranging from 10 to 50%, set to take effect in 7 days. In a phone interview overnight, the president noting the more than $26 billion in tariff revenue the Treasury Department reported last month, and predicting, quote, "We will be taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, and very quickly." That revenue, though, is paid by U.S. importers and often passed on to consumers, potentially leading to higher prices on everything from orange juice and coffee from Brazil to iPhones made in India. I asked the president if he's concerned about potential price spikes. The only price that's spiked is the hundreds of billions of dollars coming in, he told me. Democrats blasting the tariffs, which are currently being challenged in federal court.
What the Trump administration is trying to pull off is the unconstitutional power grab of Congress's revenue-raising authority.
Thursday's executive order formalized trade agreements with some major trading partners, including Japan, South Korea, and the European Union.
This is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
But the White House has yet to strike final deals with 3 of the U.S.'s largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China. Mr. Trump asked Thursday how Canada can lower its 35% tariff rate.
They have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. And all we want is fairness for our country.
The president offering Mexico a 90-day extension of its 25% tariff rate to continue negotiations after a Thursday call with Mexico's president. And after talks with Chinese negotiators Monday, the Treasury Secretary says only, quote, technical details remain to be worked out.
I'm confident that it will be done, but it's not 100% done.
We saw Senator Cantwell in Garrett's report. She'll be our guest on Morning Joe a little later this hour. So, Steph, give us your sense of the lay of the land here with these trade deals, with these tariffs on the horizon.
I think the most important level to set here is even if we ink a deal, right, even if we show the image of the president signing his name in a Sharpie, a deal doesn't mean it's a good deal. Right? Think about what we're seeing. Garrett just said it. It's not foreign countries. The president says, well, look at the billions we're bringing in. We're not bringing them in from foreign adversaries. It's U.S. importers. And now we're seeing it from companies, right? We're hearing from Adidas, Walmart, Procter & Gamble, Nike, Ralph Lauren, Mattel saying, get ready. We're going to raise prices. In the last segment, right, you talked about the president bringing back, presidential physical fitness testing in schools. Great. Well, moms like me are saying, great, I got to do my back to school shopping and hurry up because these retailers just told me prices are going to go up. So what we're seeing right now in the fact that we've spent decades pushing towards free markets and global trade, which is what Republicans pose, we're not seeing now we're going to have choosing tariffs here or there where they're strategic. We're now tariffing products that we don't even make in the United States. You just mentioned it with coffee. Talk about apparel. This is going to be a huge tax on U.S. businesses that are going to end up shrinking and U.S. consumers that are going to end up paying more. This is not a positive for America.
And Rev, to Steph's point of a moment ago, the economy to this in the markets have been pretty resilient to this point in the Trump administration, but there have been a growing number of warning signs that could change. And this jobs report might be the biggest one yet.
I think the jobs report is the biggest one yet. And I think it gives us a reason, if not to panic, but at least pause for the cause to see where we're going. But Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, if there was during the whole campaign, President Trump had said, particularly to the black and brown communities, that I'm going to deport people. They're taking your black jobs. And when I look at his jobs reports, we are still disproportionately unemployed to others in this country. The job numbers among blacks and browns has remained almost double that of whites. What happened to my black jobs with all of the deportation that Donald Trump has been doing?
Rev, the president said he was going to bring back jobs and lower prices. That's what he was going to do day one. And those are two things we're not getting at all. We're seeing the reverse of. And as you look at mass deportations, where are they going to job sites to pull people from jobs? They're going to construction sites. They're going to the service industry. You are not seeing Americans lining up to fill jobs from people that have now been deported. This is a bad picture all around. And we have a strong, resilient economy, Rev. And people keep saying, well, you know, the market is doing really well. The reason it looks like the market is doing well, because you've got some of the biggest companies in the world. We now have trillion-dollar companies, the Metas of the world, the IBMs, that are making extraordinary amounts of money. But look under that hood at all sorts of great American companies, and they are struggling. And they're going to struggle more as the job picture gets difficult, and the tariff situation is only worsening for them.
And to no one's surprise, President Trump, posting on Truth Social this morning, continued attacks on Jerome Powell, looking for that rate to be cut. Stephanie Ruhle, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We, of course, will be watching the 11th hour right here on MSNBC, 11 p.m. weeknights.
Want to get to some breaking news just into us right now. The same day as those dismal jobs numbers came out, Donald Trump is firing the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, accusing the commissioner of faking the jobs numbers in a Truth Social post. Today's report not only included lower than expected numbers for the month of July, but huge downward revisions for June and May, as we've been discussing. Back with us now, NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba on a busy day. Monica, what else is the president saying in that post?
Yeah, so this is significant, Ariel, because literally we were just talking about this a matter of moments ago. The fact that obviously when the White House and when the president specifically doesn't like the economic reports that are coming out, he bashes them. And when he does, he touts them. That's nothing new. He's been doing that since his first term and first 4 years in office and in the last 6 months or so. But what's significant about this new post on his social media platform is that he is specifically calling out Dr. Erica McIntyre, who is the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, and he is accusing her of faking the jobs numbers before the election to try and boost former Vice President and former Democratic National nominee Kamala Harris's chances of victory. He goes on and on to talk about specifically some past jobs reports and is saying that he has directed his team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately. Now, I'm told by an administration official that that has happened. I'm told again that she has been relieved of her post. And according to the president's own words here, he is saying she will be replaced with someone much more competent and qualified. He also goes on to say important numbers like this must be fair and accurate. They can't be manipulated for political purposes. So this is a very lengthy post. This is, again, I think, a reflection more than anything else of the president's displeasure when he wants to be touting what he sees as the bright spots in the economic picture picture and wants to really downplay those that show a more weakening labor market and some of these other concerns about possible inflation. And again, all of this is being raised by his own trade war and by these own tariff moves that he is putting into place that are raising a lot of questions about what it will mean for consumers ultimately that contribute to some of this data and some of these indications. So that's the latest from here. And we're working on more information to see who might replace her. This is a position that is Senate confirmed. And so the question now is whether there's somebody in the interim who will serve in that role in an acting capacity. Unclear who that replacement and who the next person will be in this job with the Department of Labor and who will oversee these labor statistics. Ariel.
And Trump also going after Fed Chair Jerome Powell as well, saying the economy is booming under Trump, despite a Fed that also plays games. So we're just getting a taste of how irritated the president is by those job numbers and by the lack of movement by the Fed. Monica, thank you, as always, for staying on top of it.
We have some breaking news from the president, who just announced he is repositioning nuclear submarines around Russia in response to what he called inflammatory statements from the former Russian president. Trump just posted, quote, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just words. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. He's apparently referring to Medvedev's statements recently criticizing Trump's foreign policy and appearing to reference a nuclear strike. I want to bring in retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs, MSNBC military analyst. Jack, what signal is Trump trying to send here? What do you make of this back and forth?
Well, we have to remember what probably generated all this from Medvedev in the first place. I mean, first of all, as an aside, the tendency to shoot from the hip, and has done so many times in the past. And this may be one of those times. But what the problem that Russia has at the moment is the crippling results of strictures on their economy as a result of the war in Ukraine and the restrictions the United States and its allies have put on the Russian economy. This makes it extremely difficult for the oligarchs who surround Putin, and that includes Medvedev as well. And so it's not surprising that harsh words are coming from the Kremlin. They don't disavow them, but frequently these words are left to dissipate in the ether and nothing ever comes of them. Trump's response
Jack, here's my question, because you make such a good point, and the New York Times puts it this way. While Mr. Trump commands the world's most powerful military, Mr. Medvedev is widely seen as a social media attack dog relegated to the periphery of President Putin's inner circle. So why even respond?
Part of it has to do with how Trump responds to anything. He doesn't like to come out and to look like he is second best in any exchange, even if the exchange like this one probably has no punch to it. So Trump responds to absolutely everything. And this is one reason why we see the kind of response we get from the president at this time.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thanks for getting up quickly on this breaking news. Appreciate that so much.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Jeffrey Epstein has one known living accomplice, convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. She has been at the center of the firestorm of scandal surrounding President Trump the last several weeks. She has suddenly been moved from the federal prison in Florida, where she was serving her 20-year sentence for her prominent role in the recruiting and trafficking of young girls to be sexually abused by Epstein and herself, to new, upgraded accommodations in a minimum security prison facility in Bryan, Texas. The move, which the administration so far expects you to believe is routine, comes after a week of pardon talk, after 2 extended day-long private meetings between Maxwell and the number 2 at DOJ, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who, oh, by the way, also happened to be Donald Trump's personal criminal defense attorney. We don't know what was discussed in those private meetings. We do know taking the meetings was highly abnormal. We do know that whenever Trump is asked about a potential pardon for Maxwell, he said over and over again that he's allowed to pardon whoever he wants. And we do know in the first 6 months of his administration, he has pardoned whoever he wants. And so now, in what is a shocking and frankly appalling scene reminiscent of Jeffrey Epstein's original sweetheart deal, the origin of this entire scandal, the one that allowed him to freely head home from prison for 6 hours at times, 6 days a week. Maxwell's new prison is a minimum security federal prison camp. These facilities feature less prison staff, limited or no fencing, along with much more freedom of movement and recreational options than any other level of federal prison. Not only do these facilities usually house nonviolent and white-collar criminals, listen to this. NBC News is reporting that Maxwell was ineligible to be transferred to this kind of facility, to a minimum security prison camp, because she is a convicted sex offender. And that's according to the Bureau of Prisons' own designation policy. The BOP had to reach in and waive the rule specifically for Maxwell to allow a sex trafficker, a sexual abuser of girls, to be moved to her current facility. In fact, among Maxwell's new fellow detainees is Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes, serving an 11-year sentence for wire fraud and conspiracy, and Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Jen Shah, serving her own 6-year sentence for wire fraud. Shah runs a fitness class in the prison called Shahmazing Abs, just one of the many activities that Jeffrey Epstein's closest confidant and fellow abuser can now enjoy. Yesterday, the family of Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein and Maxwell's most high-profile and vocal survivors, a woman who took her own life this year, spoke out very specifically about the woman who just got a sweet, sweet upgrade from Donald Trump's Bureau of Prisons.
Our sister always told us that Maxwell was even worse than Epstein. We said it in the statement that she was a monster, but this is a woman who used her womanhood to prey on young girls, vulnerable young girls. And she wasn't a light participant. She's convicted of these crimes. And the thought of offering her leniency or a complete pardon, it makes us feel sick.
Today, the White House said there was no special leniency, saying any false assertion this individual is given preferential treatment is absurd. Prisoners are routinely moved in some instances due to significant safety and danger concerns. That's not how Epstein's victims and their families see it. Today, Giuffre's family, along with 2 other survivors of Epstein's abuse, released a statement saying, President Trump has sent a clear message today. Pedophiles deserve preferential treatment and their victims do not matter. Ghislaine Maxwell is a sexual predator who physically assaulted minor children on multiple occasions, and she should never be shown any leniency. Yet without any notifications to the Maxwell victims, the government overnight has moved Maxwell to a minimum security luxury prison in Texas. This is the justice system failing victims right before our eyes. 20 more victims of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse released a statement through their lawyer saying, the victims of the Epstein-Maxwell conspiracy continue to endure the emotional pain of every development in the negotiations with Ghislaine Maxwell. They wait anxiously and expect to be afforded full access to all relevant information concerning the criminal conduct that has so severely damaged them. Then, once properly informed, they look forward to having their voices be heard with respect to any action concerning Ms. Maxwell that might be contemplated.
It's definitely coming from Trump himself as someone who worked in his first White House. You look at what the White House strategy was to combat this. They originally came out and said, look, Trump kicked him out of his club because he was a creep. And then Trump came out and said, well, no, it was because it was, I'm not on the list and, and all this stuff, and tried to push back. And then he tried to push the conspiracy theory that, oh, no, it was Comey and Obama who put me on the list. So then he's acknowledging that he's on the list somehow. And then it turned into him saying, oh, well, no, it was a dispute because he was poaching staff of mine. And he admitted that Virginia Giuffre was one of those staff members who was poached from Mar-a-Lago. And that was in 2000. And mind you, then you have Trump on record saying 2 years later that Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy and that he likes women like him, but he likes them young. And so it doesn't really seem to align then if, like, the reason that he kicked him out of the club was for poaching staff, but then it took several years for him to actually kick him out. I mean, he was on the logs at Mar-a-Lago up until 2007, I believe. So he's trying to throw whatever he can at the wall and see what's going to stick, but none of it seems to be sticking. And he's trying to gaslight his supporters right now to ignore this issue or distract them with these conspiracy theories. And it's not going to work this time. And this is the first time I think you're really seeing a divide between him and his base. And it's because his base cares about this issue. And so the response from the White House has just been totally mangled. But Trump is definitely the one dictating it. And I'm sure his advisors are trying to give him advice on it, but that at the end of the day, he's going to do what he wants to do.
Well, that's always the MO with the man. He's going to do what he wants to do. I'm just going to posit something for the conversation because both of you have really kind of put, I think, a framing of what the country's seeing unfold out there in many ways. In my estimation, the family of the victims, it's just so difficult because the victims get lost in all of this. The victims are getting lost in this conversation, America, and you need to refocus your attention here because there are at least 1,000 young women who were preyed upon, and Ms. Giuffre's family, I think, kind of nailed it, Ankush, when they said President Trump has sent a clear message. Pedophiles deserve preferential treatment, and their victims do not matter. That sums this whole thing up for me. The move, to your earlier point, you don't make the move unless there's a reason to make the move. So I'm curious as to what you think the reason was. Because no one wants to dance on that one either. No one they want to forget about the victims, and they don't want to ascribe to Donald Trump the motives that are clearly, in my estimation, indicated by the things he said, as you noted, and the moves he's making, as we see with Maxwell.
And 7 days after the Deputy Attorney General spent 2 days in Tallahassee with her.
Which is unprecedented.
A Deputy Attorney General that used to be Donald Trump's personal attorney in a recent case prior to him being elected.
So and Ghislaine Maxwell's personal attorney, a friend on a podcast.
And so now, America, you got all the dots connected, and Ankush is going to clarify.
He's going to get to an answer soon once we let him talk.
Okay, look, what might they be doing? I can only speculate based on why you don't do anything like this in the ordinary course. The reason is you are not supposed to be giving cooperators anything because then you are currying favor with them and you are incentivizing them to tell you what you want to hear.
And what is it that you think they want to hear?
Well, look, I think they probably want some information that exculpates, if not exonerates Trump, which she could make up if she wants to, and information
she's already been ascribed to be a liar.
Yeah, and she implicating political enemies of Trump. No, she's a terrible candidate for a cooperator. She's in prison on child sex trafficking charges, a 20-year sentence. She was charged twice, as you just noted, for perjury. Those were dropped after the sex trafficking conviction. She went to trial, contested her guilt, which is her right, but she's never cooperated with the government. And we're talking about a period of time that is now so far in the past that will be extremely difficult to corroborate anything she has to say and to make it usable. And the whole thing with Blanche going down there, I cannot begin to describe to you how strange and bizarre this is and how uniform this reaction is among current and former federal prosecutors. The idea that the Deputy Attorney General, who's supposed to be the second in command at DOJ, would intervene in any case, much less a case he wasn't involved in, would go in and spend 2 days with a garbage person, if you ask me, who shouldn't get anyone's time, and potentially be there without a witness or an FBI agent to memorialize
that part
is remarkable. I mean, this too. Now, I don't know if anyone's confirmed definitively that there was not an FBI agent in presence.
No, they're not telling us.
They're not telling us. Okay.
So they're leading us to ask more questions.
They don't tell us. We can assume whatever.
If that is what happened, that there was not an FBI agent there, this too is a violation of the most basic prosecutorial practices. Why? Because now no one knows what was said during that meeting. And you cannot trust a situation where, like, let's go, she goes on to provide some testimony or whatever, implicating Bill Clinton or whatever, or exonerating Donald Trump. No one is ever going to be able to rule out the possibility that Blanche spent 2 days in that office coaching her.
On what to say.
Which is why you don't do things like that. You have a witness and you have a report of the meeting. So this is all off the wall.
I'll add on top of that, too. So obviously you're talking about the prosecutorial standards and how they're in clear violation and how that kind of muddies the waters in the case itself against her. But I think in the court of public opinion, this also looks horrible for Trump. I mean, having his deputy attorney general and former personal lawyer go there and meet with her. And then if she ends up singing this tune of, oh, it's, you know, Bill Clinton was on the list and Trump is completely innocent and all these things. I think Trump, it just goes to show how dumb he thinks his supporters are, because he really thinks that then they're going to buy that. Whereas I think a lot of people are seeing through the gaslighting on this administration's part and what they're trying to do. They're trying to fool them. Trump campaigned on this issue, said that he was going to release the files. And this is just another example of a broken campaign promise from this administration. He said he would protect Medicaid. He said that he would end the war in Ukraine on day one. He said that he would release these files. I mean, I could list off the laundry list of items of things that he has broken his promises on, but his supporters are fed up and they're sick and tired of it. And that's why at the organization that I'm doing work with, Home of the Brave, we're out here amplifying the voices of people who have been impacted by these disastrous policies. And his supporters, as well as some of his newer voters in his coalition, really care about this Epstein issue. And I don't think it's going away for him anytime soon.
One Republican congressman ventured beyond the Beltway and went back to his district in Wisconsin, where he was met with consistent boos and jeers during a town hall last night in his home district over his support for President Trump's policies. Congressman Brian Stile began his town hall in the town of Elkhorn with the Pledge of Allegiance, during which the crowd emphasized the last words, and justice for all. Striking moment there. Later, several attendees expressed their disappointment with the congressman, including one person who asked why he was not stopping ICE raids by masked agents targeting immigrants.
Why are they wearing masks and why are they unidentified?
We'll probably agree to disagree on some of my answer here, but what I view is the moral hazard created by the Biden administration by allowing the U.S.-Mexico border to remain insecure. And so, it's completely fine that we disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing on the topic. President Biden had a different view than I did on the importance of securing the U.S.-Mexico border. But as millions of illegal immigrants came into the United States and there was a lack of action by the federal government, you're now seeing that action take place with the removal particularly of individuals who are in the country illegally.
I am so disappointed. I am so disappointed in how you represent us as the citizens of Walworth County. Southeast Wisconsin has not been represented by you. President Trump seems to run Southeast Wisconsin through you. And all I have to ask is I will be out there working hard if you choose to run for any office.
I don't think you're the right fit for us anymore. I just think it's time to go. You just don't relate to most of us anymore, and you got to know when to step down. I think it's time.
That was Congressman Stiles' first town hall since the passage of the Republicans' budget mega bill, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Jen Palmieri, we've talked a lot about how Republicans during this August recess are going to go home and face tough questions. This congressman certainly did. And it's striking, though, about what he was asked about. Certainly, you know, we wondered if Epstein would come up sometimes, certainly cuts to Medicaid and the like. But this one in particular seemed to really draw the constituents' anger over immigration, the deportations of their neighbors, particularly by masked ICE agents. Do we think this congressman Wisconsin saw last night is coming attractions for what his colleagues will throughout this next month?
If they have the nerve to do the town halls, right? I mean, what's interesting about there's one of two things happening in that town hall. Either it was organized by Democrats, and that shows that Democrats in Wisconsin are organized, and that's positive news for Democrats, or it was not organized, and that is organic anger, and that is also positive news for Democrats. I mean, so the things that were supposed to be Trump's that were supposed to be his strengths, right? Immigration was supposed to be his strength, and you see public opinion continues to that he continues to lose in public opinion on immigration. That number is going down, and I think it's because people just sort of feel at their gut, as that woman expressed, like, why are they wearing masks? You know, it's not. It's. She doesn't go to the deportation, the question of people being deported, but it's also just the manner in which it's happening. So, that just seems. It's the kind of things that strike a chord with people because you're like, that's not who we are as Americans, and you feel that with immigration, and you see, public support for immigrants and immigrants staying in the country is going up as a result of this. That's out there. It's a gut thing with people. They don't like how this is being handled, and it's sort of, I mean, one of those women sounded like she might have been a Republican who had supported him in the past. But on the Medicaid, I mean, I think that's there. So what Democrats should do in August is really define what happened in the big, beautiful bill to people understand that how it impacts their health care costs. And I would make that a singular focus so that people understand Medicaid costs, what they mean for rural hospitals. And even if you're not reliant on Medicaid, what it likely is going to mean more visits to the emergency room for people who are on Medicaid and can't get support now. And that means your health care costs are going to go up as well. And go into September with whatever people feel about immigration, but also some definition around health care costs, which is one of the biggest concerns people have when they're, sitting around the kitchen table talking about what how their own personal economy is going.
And Sam, we are a long way from November 2026, but any Republican looking to hold on to his or her job then has to look at that last night and feel a little bit antsy.
Yeah, I haven't seen a negative reaction like that since we ran those focus groups on your early way too early hosting. It was brutal.
Yeah, you're right. Someone just said I wasn't a good fit.
Yeah, and your time you should probably leave the stage. I'm with Jen. The notable thing here is that he showed up, right? I mean, here's the thing. These Republicans have been instructed to not hold these town halls for a reason, because they're going to produce spectacles like that. The electorate, at least the electorate that is willing to get up and go to a physical town hall and express their opinions, is deeply angry with Republicans. I think the surprise, I'm with Jen here, is not just that it's about, health care or the big, beautiful bill. The surprise to me was that they mentioned the ICE agents and the masking. It's not a one issue, but it's becoming that. And you see that in the polls now, too, where public perceptions about immigration, which was Trump's strength, have really soured, and he now is underwater on the topic. Not necessarily on securing the border. He still gets positive marks for that. But on the other facets of immigration policy, he is underwater. And so if you combine that with the big, beautiful bill, with Medicaid, with the possibility that there's going to be premium increases because the Obamacare subsidies go away, with the issue of the cost of goods, as Jared Bernstein talked. I mean, that is a bad brew for Republicans. And if you can't show up at town halls to pitch it, it becomes even harder to turn it around.
Yeah, no question there. I think the Republicans who do have these town halls are going to be in for it, many districts across the country.
Garrett, unemployment up, employers pulling back on hiring. It's not a good picture for a White House right now. How's the administration responding this morning?
Yeah, on no formal statement from the White House yet, a lot of the president's allies in the Republican Party have tried to point to the broader health of the overall economy as a way of downplaying these numbers. But just a short time ago, one of the president's top economic advisors acknowledged that these numbers are troubling, particularly the downward revisions in previous months' job data that was released today. Take a listen.
The downward revisions to May and June are not great. A lot of that was due to quirks of a statistical process called seasonal adjustment, about 60% of it due to changing seasonal factors and things like incorrectly capturing teachers. But what that means is that most of those jobs will appear in other months of the year. Some of it is due to our border policies.
So some of that you hear the White House basically trying to blame this on technical quirks of how the jobs data is calculated. I'm not an economist, but the idea that seasonality somehow is changing from year to year or teachers' schedules are changing from year to year, I don't know entirely pass muster. Anna, the White House, I think, is likely to be on the defensive about this for the rest of the day.
Anna, what do these job numbers signal to you?
Yeah, so it was kind of an ugly report this month, much weaker than expected. Those revisions erasing the gains that we had seen earlier. I mean, another notable thing is that the United States is month after month, it seems, shedding manufacturing jobs. And so this is one of the goals of President Trump's tariffs, to revive manufacturing. But it seems like, tariffs are raising costs of inputs for factories. They are raising prices, and that can slow economic growth. So I think what we're seeing with this report is really the first evidence of these tariffs hitting the economy. And we've seen that in other numbers, inflation numbers as well. That's something that many economists expect to kind of build and become more obvious over time.
Diane, what kind of pressure could this create for the White House and for Jerome Powell?
Well, this is really a hard report for the Federal Reserve, especially with the two dissents that we saw at the July meeting. The one thing that Chris Waller was consistently concerned about, which I had empathy for, was the narrow margin of error in the labor market. We had three sectors that were essentially the three pillars holding up this stool on job gains since June of 2023. That was state and local government hiring, leisure and hospitality, and the healthcare and social assistance. Now we're down to one leg, and a one-legged stool does not stand for long. And that is what the Federal Reserve is currently going to be worried about, is this combination of factors. This is something they forecast, a mild bout of stagflation. So far, it's not increased the unemployment rate because we've actually lowered the threshold on what is needed to keep the unemployment rate at 4.2%. And that is that we've shrunk the civilian labor force. We've seen 1.4 million foreign-born workers leave the labor force entirely since April. That is a stunning amount. It's not seasonally adjusted, but it's the largest amount we've seen move from employed to no longer in the labor force since the pandemic. That is really a startling number, holding unemployment down. Otherwise, we would have had a much higher unemployment number. And in fact, the ranks of the unemployed went up, along with those who had to accept part-time work instead of full-time work. Those are all signs of economic stress in the underlying labor market. And the one piece of sort of silver lining was that wages accelerated, but that was really driven by a quirk that was a seasonal quirk. It was in retail. And what we saw was a lot of minimum wages went through in the month of July that bumped up retail wages, but also that's not something they seasonally adjust for, these minimum wage hikes. And so it was an outsized hike. It was 1.2% in 1 month in retail, which is going to be reversed in the month of August.
Well, you explain why all this is significant. And Anna, I was thinking about how just a couple days ago, I think it was Howard Lutnick who was taking a victory lap when the GDP number came out at 3% and was saying, this is Trump's economy. And yet whenever anything negative has happened economically, President Trump has blamed Biden. Does Trump own these jobs numbers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question, right? So the economy is a big place, and typically, presidents, both Democrats and Republicans alike, have less influence over it than you might think. It's got its own energy that persists from administration to administration. But I do think that, the president is making just dramatic and remarkable changes to trade and economic policy these days, as Diane was mentioning with immigration, as I was talking about with tariffs. And we really are starting to see some of the ramifications of that spill into growth and into inflation. It will certainly become more obvious in the months to come. And the U.S. economy is still a pretty resilient place. But yes, I think it is rapidly becoming the president's economy.
Garrett, you spoke to the president last night about the new tariffs. So let's talk about where things stand this morning. How many countries actually have deals? Which countries don't? And what are the expectations from the White House about what happens now?
Yeah, on the dictionary definition of deals, only about 10 countries have something in place that both sides have agreed to. Much of the rest of the world has some kind of temporary arrangement in place or a unilateral tariff level set by the White House. Many of those smaller trading partners at or around 10%. That'll be kind of the stock in place. The revenue from these tariffs won't even start to be collected, at least the new ones, for another week or so. And the president made clear that he's still open to hearing offers from other countries that could come to him about lowering trade barriers or doing what we've seen from Japan, South Korea, the EU, to invest more in the United States or to make commitments to buy things like American oil and gas. Anna, we've talked about this before, but the president loves the idea of tariffs as a tool, as a way to compel action from foreign governments. And in our conversation, he was very clearly pleased with the manner in which he's been able to get all of these different concessions from governments around the world, and that his phone is available for other leaders who want to call and make an offer.
Anna, the tariffs have been all over the board. It's hard to make sense of a lot of the moves, like the military dictatorship of Myanmar having basically the same tariff rate as Switzerland. But if you're an American business, you mostly just care about your bottom line. As these tariffs go into effect, do businesses have clarity on the details?
So, no, there still is a lot that the government needs to explain. So, for example, there is often the government has been talking about a higher tariff rate for products made in countries that have a certain amount of Chinese content in it. To prevent goods from China from being routed around the world into the United States. We still don't know what that percentage that is. The administration has said that they will share that in about a week. There are a lot of other uncertainties about the fine print of these trade agreements, and we've often seen disagreements between the United States and foreign countries about what exactly was in that agreement. And then just the playing field has been shifting so dramatically for companies. So I've been talking to business owners who have been trying to deal with it. Some have been trying to bring in products ahead of the tariffs or just paused their shipments altogether. But it is a very confusing, kind of difficult landscape for companies that depend on either overseas supplies or overseas customers.
Diane, 90 deals in 90 days ended up being less than a dozen deals in 120 days. Some countries went from 1 or 2% to 10 to 50% tariff rates. So which key goods will be most impacted here and when?
Well, we're starting to see it already. The big ticket items have begun because of the aluminum and steel tariffs that are out there that are so high. It's showing up in appliances. It's showing up in furniture. It's showing up in toys. It's showing up in tools, in fitness equipment. So we're starting to see it come through. The goods inflation in the PCE index that we got yesterday actually was the largest on durable goods, big ticket items, excluding the autos, was the largest increase on a month since December of 2022. So it's starting to show up in those items first. And we know that it's going to show up in a lot more consumer staples as we get into the month of August. There's been a lot of announcements about that. And so it's going to be at the grocery store in many ways. That's everything from packaged goods to the aluminum cans that things go into. There's been some waivers there and some waivers not. And last time around, we know in 2018 and 2019, they did show up in consumer prices. And the bottom line, there's this stagflationary nature to these tariffs because they're so large. We're talking about doubling the tariff rate from effectively about 9% today to 18% by year end with what's in the pipeline. That is huge from less than 3%. There's no way that they don't both squeeze profit margins and show up in consumer prices, that's what makes them stagflationary. It's a headwind to employment, and it's a tailwind for inflation, and that's the challenge for the Federal Reserve. The other issue is the uncertainty, the uneven nature of the tariffs. The uncertainty is a tax in and of itself on the economy, and that just spiked again. And I think that's very important because that weighs on people's decisions, firms' decisions to hire up in this environment because they don't know where to place their bet and how to reshuffle their supply chains.
That's a really good point. And you have said that it can take 6 to 18 months for the full impact to kind of trickle through economically. Diane, the average U.S. tariff rate is now about 18%, according to the Yale Budget Lab. So that is the highest in nearly a century. Is this going to transform the American economy?
It will transform it, but not in all the ways I think that the administration would hope. And that's what we know, is we know from all of the research on these kinds of efforts. First of all, there are certain reasons to have tariffs for security reasons. We can debate those, but you want to have them more sparingly, and you want them paired with industrial policy. That's important to protect our security. That said, we know from 2018 and 2019, the steel tariffs cost more jobs than they created. They cost, for every 1,000 jobs they created in steel, 75,000 lost in manufacturing overall because of higher input costs. You can't just flip the switch on factories overnight. And we already have over 400,000 jobs that are still unfilled in the manufacturing sector, where manufacturers say they can't find the workers to fill those jobs. So it begs the question of, are these the kinds of jobs that are going to be created? They're not the same as they were in the past. And do people have the skills necessary to work in these kinds of jobs that are highly automated factories now with a lot fewer workers if you were able to bring things home? So I think all of those things need to be taken into account when you think about this. And the evidence on all the tariffs historically, there's a reason that economists don't like them, is because they tend to have this exact impact.